I keep promising you all a boys video and I keep failing to deliver because yes, it is still being written. But the situation has come to a point where if I put all my eggs in that basket, I would not be bringing out videos for months. And also, there is a segment that I was going to include in the original video that I decided to cut because it didn't really flow very well. So I decided to take one of these, the show is better than the comic videos, and go through it point by point, explaining why what a lot of people think about the comic is not bad interpretation, it's just wrong. It's provably wrong. I have the receipts, and in some cases, it's the direct opposite of what people are claiming it is. I won't really be diving into the quality of the show all that much, although I think it has gone the, what I like to call the Young Justice trajectory. First season, very good. Second season, steep downward climb in quality, but people, for some reason, didn't notice. Season 3, people are starting to see the cracks, and season 4, now people are starting to get fed up. And then, of course, you've still got those who are clinging on, still claiming that the show is better written than the comic, objectively speaking. Yeah, people are still saying that. So I've just come in from a night out. I thought, why waste the makeup? Just stick on the camera, record something. You haven't done that in a while. And I hope this illuminates for some of you why this is taking me so long.
Hello everyone, Sober Ainsley here. I just thought it was important for me to pop in and apologise if this isn't as coherent or well thought out as I would like it to be, but my several cocktails deep brain was getting impatient with the lack of progress on literally any project that I have in progress at the moment, and thought that this was a good idea, so enjoy.
And just before we get into it, I want to say this YouTuber made this video when the first season was the only one that was out. Another reason why I won't be diving too far into the quality of the show, because the quality of the show was decent to great in season 1. And also, I have no problem with people not liking The Boys or not liking Garth Ennis's work. It's not for everyone, including me sometimes. And with the distinctly Northern Irish humour, sometimes Garth Ennis doesn't make it easy for you to like his comics. But anyway, yeah, I'll be focusing mainly on what he says about the comic and why it's wrong, and sometimes the hypocrisy regarding the show. If I bring up anything outside season 1, that's nothing to do with him. That's just a point of comparison I'm making. I've skipped the beginning because he basically just goes through the summary of what the comic and the show are about.
We do sometimes get a look at the inner workings of the Seven and Vought, but it's usually through the viewpoint of new recruit Starlight. She's an innocent girl from the Bible Belt, and she begins a relationship with Hughie when they meet outside of their respective jobs. But the comics take a lot of time to have the boys beat up other superheroes before eventually dealing with the Seven. And so that central conflict is mostly backburnered for the comics, along with Hughie's relationship with Starlight, whose real name is Annie.
I don't know if this is a criticism on his part, but the reason it's backburnered is because it's an episodic comic. It has an episodic structure. So of course, the main conflict is something simmering in the background rather than the main focus.
Let's get into some of the key differences between the comics and the TV show. First of all, in the comics, the boys all take Compound V so that they can go toe-to-toe with superheroes. Butcher, after recruiting Hughie, injects him with Compound V without warning. Consequently, Hughie accidentally kills teen superhero Blarney Cock with a super-powered punch. In the TV show, the boys are ordinary people, which means that they're always the underdogs when they're going up against a superhero, with the exception of Kimiko, the female.
Now here comes a big bugbear of mine, where I think people are genuinely misremembering the show in order to make it seem better than the comics. Because a big complaint, a dumb one in my opinion, is that the boys take Temp V so they can go toe-to-toe with superheroes. That is something I'll be diving much further into in the actual video, and how the narrative use of Temp V in each iteration is very, very different. But in the comic, the boys are not the underdogs. They are part of the government. and again, this is something I'll be diving really hard in with the main video, but the point isn't the heroic, anti-heroic underdogs going after the big evil bad guy like it is in the show. It is, the main point of the comic is the tempestuous relationship between governments and corporations. The show puts Vought as this absolutely unstoppable, really crazily powerful force that even governments bow down to, which again, that's something we'll have to wait for when we get to the actual video. But yeah, it's dumb. It's really, really dumb. But the narrative purpose of Temp V is because of course they use it. They're basically policing superheroes.
They have to plan things out, strategize, and figure out a weakness to exploit. This creates a lot more tension.
No, not really. I think people who make this argument are genuinely condensing the entire show into the first couple of episodes. This particular YouTuber can't be blamed as much as other people since, well, the first season was the only one that was out when he was making this video, but the point still stands. But even so, the translucent arc is really the only time the boys do this. Yes, we see them sneaking about, doing espionage, researching, planning to steal Compound V once they learn it exists, but aside from Hughie's little spark of smarts here, the translucent arc is really the only time we see them do this. Most of the time, especially beyond season 1, the boys are fugitives on the most wanted list, with superheroes who can see through walls, travel faster than light, and hear things from miles away, not to mention Vought, who is so freaking powerful, again, we'll get to that mistake, that they probably have access to CCTV all over the freaking place, and unlike in the comics, the boys are not government agents. They don't have the heavy-weighted backing behind them. They're just strolling about like nobody's business. Yeah, I can see it was a really great narrative device to get rid of Temp V and have the boys go after the superheroes using their wits. Shame that the show does not spend nearly as much time doing that as the audience seems to think it did. A part of me understands this because the translucent episodes were so good. They were so cleverly written, and it is a great story to have your underdogs, because they're underdogs in the show, they're not underdogs in the comic. That is the dumb comparison a lot of people make. The boys are very, very different in the comic, and so you're essentially complaining that they're not like the show when Ennis was doing something completely different. But again, main video. But yes, it is good to have your underdogs constantly have a fire under them and have them develop clever and satisfying ways to get out of dangerous situations. That is great writing. That was great writing. But as I said, the show is absent that for the vast majority of its runtime, and when it does try post-season 1, even post the translucent arc sometimes, it's not nearly as clever as those first couple episodes. And you're out here acting like this is freaking Tower of Babel or something. So, if you're gonna say that the show is better because they remove Temp V, well, you can pretty much count on one hand the amount of times that actually makes a satisfying difference.
And it also gives Hughie more agency, as he's actively deciding to join the boys instead of essentially being forced into the team.
Oh, where do I even start with this one? Did you get the comic and the show mixed up? Did you switch these two? There is no way you could have actually said those words if you paid attention to both properties. So, for those who didn't read the comic, and for people like this gentleman here, who I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, seem to be under the impression that they read it, but actually didn't, let's have a look at these two.
Hughie on the TV show is able to display a lot more ingenuity. Examples include his missions to infiltrate the Seven and superhero Popclaw's apartment, so that the boys can conduct surveillance. He also has more of an opportunity to be brave, like when he disobeys Butcher and allows himself to get caught by Vought mercenaries so that he can help the rest of the team escape. Those characteristics all help to make Hughie more likable and relatable. Before the series is over, he's standing up to Billy Butcher, which takes him about 6 years worth of comics to get to that same point.
Let's start with the agency argument. I'm confused because the whole point of that first arc in the first season was the fact that he didn't have agency and he gained it. Hughie from the comics is just an ordinary guy from Scotland. His girlfriend dies, he's incredibly traumatized by it, and Billy comes back to the UK because he sees that Hughie didn't take any money for the death of his girlfriend. And he thinks, that guy has a lot of integrity, we could use him on the team. So he goes to recruit Hughie for a job, okay? A legitimate job. That's the difference here. We'll get into how they meet in the show in a minute. But from Hughie's point of view, the love of his life has just died. This guy comes and tells him, we can give you a job where you can actually make a difference for people like you to whom this has happened. And he gives him some money and he says, just come to America, see what we do, and then you can decide. So Hughie decides to go to America to see what this job is all about. Then, as he said, Butcher forcibly injects him with Compound V. We'll get to that when we get to the standing up to Billy point. Then he leaves, and then he meets Annie, and he is contemplating, again, whether or not to take this job. And he says to her, I really think that I could do this job well. I think I want to do it. It's not the job, it's just the people. And after just having a human conversation with her, he decides off his own back, with his own decision-making capacity, with all the information presented in front of him, to take the job. How does he not have agency again? And the show, Hughie is a little bit of a downtrodden young man, has trouble standing up for himself, and same thing, love of his life dies right in front of him, and Butcher comes in telling him falsely that he is an FBI agent and tricks him into doing espionage work, again, under false pretenses, and then goes back to his daily job, just ready to go on with his life, until Translucent, who saw him doing the espionage in Vought, tracks him down, and Butcher comes in to save him. So, together, they take Translucent out because, well, they don't want to be pulled in by a soup, but of course now they've taken a soup out. They're both stuck. And it just proves like how little agency Hughie has in this situation when they actually hear that Translucent is alive.
Oh, Hughie, you don't fucking get it. Pull the car! This over! Fuck's sight worse, he's seen our faces.
And the latter half of the arc is Translucent poking at Hughie about his lack of agency. And it's only when he comes to that decision and blows him up that he gains that agency. That's not a criticism of the show. That is the story. That is wonderful. But to say that Hughie is better because he has more agency, no, that's, like I said, that's the complete opposite of what's going on. Hughie in the comic has way, way more agency. And again, since in later seasons they seem to be just flitting the characters about willy-nilly however they want, it's still the case that Hughie has far, far more agency in the comic. Honestly, I'm so freaking confused. Looking at these two, and their retrospective messy introductions to the boys' team, how could you honestly think that this one had more agency than the other? When every step of the way in the comic, Hughie is the one making the decision.
Hughie on the TV show is able to display a lot more ingenuity.
Yeah, I'm just gonna throw up some examples of Hughie's ingenuity. This will be happening a lot. I'll just throw up comic book panels that just directly contradict what this guy says, because it happens every sentence, if not every other sentence.
He also has more of an opportunity to be brave, like when he disobeys Butcher and allows himself to get caught by Vought mercenaries so that he can help the rest of the team escape.
Hold on. Did you just say... Put together, Ainsley. It's the cocktails talking. You don't think Comic Hughie is brave? Really? You couldn't think of, like, any examples where Comic Hughie was very brave? Where not only was he brave, but he would, when he saw something wrong, or saw an injustice, he would just charge in regardless of his own safety? Like all the freaking time? Like many, many times throughout the run of the comic.
Before the series is over, he's standing up to Billy Butcher, which takes him about 6 years worth of comics to get to that same point. Until then, his character is stagnant.
Oh god, please stop! The first thing Hughie does when Butcher stabs him with the temp V is to call him out, tell him to fuck off, and leaves. He leaves. The only reason, as I said earlier, that he comes back is because he sits down calmly and rationally, makes a fully qualified decision on whether or not he wants to take this legitimate goddamn job, okay? But no. Also, Hughie stands up to Billy all the freaking time. There's the storyline where they're investigating the murder of a gay teen, and Hughie calls out Butcher on his homophobic language and how he shouldn't be talking like that. And then there's the G-Men arc, where he so badly wants to help people, despite the fact that they are the ones who are putting him in danger. He ignores Billy and says, fuck you, I'm going to do this anyway. And then there's issue 32, where they're arguing over the female. There's issue 40, when they're arguing over Super Duper. Again, Hughie putting himself in grave danger to help others. Issue 41, where he again stands up to supers. It's a message about being kind can be led to be taken advantage of, but Hughie never lets people walk over him. He stands up for what's right. Issue 44, where he confronts Billy about standing back and watching Malchemical do the horrible things he does. Issue 55, where he stands up to Mallory. Issue 56, where Hughie asks for a command position, doesn't get it, but still stands up and asks for it more than Hughie in the show has ever done. And no, not that pissy little squirt of nothing.
Don't you worry. Daddy's home.
Issue 59, where he stands up for the trans girls. Issue 67, where he stands up to Monkey. Hughie is standing up to Billy and many, many others all the freaking time. How could you... You see why I start to get a little bit suspicious that the people who make these arguments haven't actually read the comic? Because I know that's kind of a mean thing to think, a mean perspective to take, but I hope you can understand why I get a little bit suspicious with this, because this isn't even the worst of it. Yes, Hughie does acquiesce to a lot of Billy's demands, but I think you are forgetting that in the comic, that Billy is his boss, like his actual freaking work boss, which is not the case in the show, and the things Hughie generally gives in on are job related. Because the comic is more episodic, usually Hughie has a problem with the way Billy handles things, calls him out on it, and sometimes that'll be something Billy will acknowledge and apologise for, and their relationship will be in a better place because of it.
I lost me bottle a little bit when I pumped you one. So, sorry?
No, I mean, actually freaking apologise. Until the latter half of the comic, where character development, because yes, there is that, comes in, and the relationship between the boys starts to break down. Okay, I'll be getting into the Billy is just an asshole argument in the main video. That is something that's just going to have to wait. But I want to hone in on this whole Jack from Jupiter thing.
And his stabbing death of Jack from Jupiter, which lasts so long, Jack passes out, and when he comes to, Billy is still stabbing him.
I've mostly just been playing it up by this point, because a lot of my friends find me freaking out over this stuff very entertaining, and I hope you do too. But this did genuinely make me a little bit miffed. It's so misleading and so disingenuous. Let me ask you guys a question. From the way this guy is framing it, are you getting the impression that Billy just randomly did this to Jack from Jupiter for some kind of sadistic pleasure? Or just because? From the way this is framed, do you get any semblance of motive? Well, there is one. The narrative one and the in-universe one. The narrative one is Billy's character arc, because yes, comic book non-readers, he does have one. Ignore it, and it drives me freaking crazy. The in-universe reason is because Jack from Jupiter killed Terror.
And I know this was a case of mistaken identity. Jack from Jupiter didn't actually kill Terror, someone else did, but Billy thought he did, and Jack did make some explicit threats, so this isn't a defense of Billy's actions in any sense. The word Billy is a bad character, which is the point, but the whole assertion that he's just an entitled frat boy who does terrible things to people because he gets sadistic pleasure out of it. Consider the fact that he started out the comic like this, and this is where he ends up. So, yeah, no progression, no character development, he's just a character who just does things to people because he gets sadistic pleasure out of it. Seriously, this kind of thing happens all the time when people are critiquing this comic. Not just this guy's video. This guy's video is the easiest one to pick apart, but there are worse ones than his.
Wait a second, just stop. You're telling me there's something that happens after the coup fails and Homelander dies? I thought it ended right there. Oh, you poor, sweet, misguided child. No, that's not the ending. Not by a long shot. And for those who did know it goes beyond that point, I should clarify to them that the ending isn't just Butcher kills the boys because, and whoever decided not to explain it beyond that is straight up excluding context, emotional payoff, themes, and can kindly suck my dick.
The last thing besides Hughie on this earth Butcher genuinely cared about, an innocent creature who was loyal and loving to him beyond all others, the second last thing severing Billy of his humanity, because again, yes, non-readers, he did have that, and maybe you missed it. Maybe you missed all those tender moments.
You'll have to forgive me. This is the point where I was tripping over my words, even more than I had been, so I decided to refer to historical Sober Ainsley's notes.
Yet maybe you missed issue 49, issue 56. Maybe you missed Homelander himself warning Stillwell not to harm the dog if he didn't want to push Billy over the edge. Maybe you missed the entirety of issue 32 and 59. But despite the words, "Why'd you kill my dog? Why'd you kill my dog? Why'd you do it, Jack? Why'd you kill my dog?" literally being on screen, I presume you must have seen it. So, what else am I left to assume? Like, you just framed Billy like this, like he just decided to brutally kill this guy because?
In the comics, the female is mute and lethal, but her origin is that she accidentally ate Compound V from the corpses of superpowered beings. In the show, she's given an actual name, Kimiko, and we learn that she was a child soldier given Compound V by Vought-funded guerrilla fighters.
Right, with the best will in the world, I'll give you the female because in the show she's actually a real character. But once again, you're leaving out very important information, is that that's the joke. They call her the female because this comic is a send-up of superhero tropes, and the female of the team is one of those tropes. Does that make her a better character? No. Because, as I said, she's not meant to really be one in the comic. She was written to be a punchline. You have to take that into consideration when you're including a character if you're going to critique a person's work, instead of just praising someone for taking a punchline and turning it into a character, when, again, I would like to point out that the show takes actual characters and turns them into punchlines, which is a very different thing, but again, no time for that. Now we have to talk about them making Vought the villain and how it simplifies everything rather than adding complexity, completely destroys the message, makes this more of a generic superhero story or a Superman gone bad story in subversive clothing than the actually subversive story the comic was.
Everyone loves to bask in their glow. But tomorrow morning, no one's putting soups in the national defense. It won't get out of committee, much less hit the floor. If I was on the line, it'd scare the shit out of me to have Homelander there.
Yeah, it really terrifies me, an American politician, to have Homelander fighting for America on the front lines, despite the fact that we've been trying to make super soldiers since before we started knocking on Hitler's door. It really terrifies me. An American politician. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Again, more diving in with the main video about how the comic isn't actually about taking down a big corporation. It's about the really contentious relationship between governments and corporations, whereas the show kind of just makes the government kind of this, just another one of Vought's victims, a somewhat complicit one, yes, but yeah, it is really, really weird and creepy how the writers are so willing to just kind of almost let the government off the hook when, again, the boys work for the government in the comic. This is why they're not the underdogs. This is giants going after giants, okay? That's why Temp V served its narrative purpose in the comic. So yeah, again, doing two very different things here, but yeah, that is dumb. That is very, very dumb. That any politician would turn down the chance to put freaking super soldiers in their army. Yeah, I really, really believe that. But there's also the fact that, again, so freaking much to talk about. You see why this is taking so long. The government, if they believe that your invention has a military application, they can seize it from you.
You should know we're a little concerned about this being used in weapons.
Oh, well, let me put your mind at ease. What we use it for is none of your business.
Why haven't they been in on this from the beginning? This line did instinctually make me laugh, but most of the concrete information for why this is so stupid comes from this video. I'll link it below. And that brings us to the number one problem with making Vought this untouchable, sinister, always 2 steps ahead villain. The show inexplicably and suspiciously goes out of its way to portray the US government as somewhat complicit in an either coerced and trying to do the right thing kind of way or a negligent kind of way. The only time it's portrayed as actually bad is when the bad Vought people infiltrate the government, as opposed to the comics and real life where corporations are literally in bed with governments. And by in bed, I don't mean the government being this poor coerced maiden who doesn't actually want to be there, but the other partner is so powerful. No, an equally powerful partner. Like 2 people in a mutually beneficial arranged marriage hate fucking each other. In the comic, it made perfect sense. Vought infiltration of the government does happen in the comic, but again, it's part of an ongoing power struggle between 2 massive factions, the 2 massive factions that run our society. It used to be kings and religion, now it's corporations and governments. That is the message of the comics that people swear up and down the show did better.
One great change is to the character of Stillwell, a Vought executive in charge of the Seven. In the comics, he's James Stillwell and cares about nothing but Vought's profits and how the media sees the Seven. He's a sociopath and honestly, kind of one note.
True, but much like the female, only on a much more important scale story-wise, that is the point. I'll be getting back to that one because there's a larger point I want to make about that character and the message.
She also goes through an arc realizing that her dream of being on the Seven really isn't her dream, it was her mother's, and it doesn't come close to meeting her expectations. She also finds herself challenging her religion.
And that was just never a thing in the comics. Never. Wasn't a key point in her character, wasn't one of the early parts that was explored about her character. Just wasn't there. Just wasn't in the comic whatsoever. That's something the show did really well, but it wasn't in the comic. Jesus Christ. Jesus freaking Christ. You see where my frustration comes from? Read the comic. Please. Again, if you don't like it, nobody has to read something they don't like. But if you're going to critique it, read it, please.
Yeah, Starlight, again, I'll have a larger point to make about her, but I'll save it for later because there's one thing I want to comment on when he talks about Hughie and Starlight's relationship.
When Annie figures out that Hughie lied to her when they were starting a relationship, it gives their relationship actual tension and stakes. The actors have great chemistry.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to fundamentally disagree with you on that point. Not that they don't have chemistry, they definitely do. They've got a nice little back and forth going on, but they could be playing cousins for all the sexual tension involved in any scene they're in. It's genuinely kind of awkward watching these two trying to convince us they're a couple.
And we want it to work, but can understand why it might not because of each character's responsibilities.
Because that was never a thing in the comic? No, the fact that their little bubble of bliss was their own escape from their respective tumultuous jobs. There was no feeling whatsoever that this might not work out if it ever came to light because their jobs put them at odds with each other. I mean, Hughie is so traumatized by what A-Train did to him that he literally vomits when he finds out that Starlight is a super. It's just not what happens in the comic.
Ultimately, I found myself really caring for the main characters, and I even had sympathy for most of the antagonists.
Again, this is another thing. I'll get to it when it comes to a large point I want to make about Ennis's writing and how subversive it generally is, and how this desperate need to make characters likable ends up unintentionally venerating them and makes the Boys TV show not as subversive as people think it is. And certainly not as subversive as the comic truly is.
In the comics, Billy Butcher always struck me as some sort of entitled frat boy that just got sadistic pleasure by hurting others. And by the end of the comics, without giving away the storyline, he proves that he is not a friend to anyone on his own team.
Newsflash, everyone. Billy Butcher is the bad guy. And the boys are not the good guys. They're not the scrappy yet tortured but also kind of good anti-heroes going after the big bad massive bad guy. So you take the element of a bad guy hidden in plain sight who's there to make a point about corporations, governments, their dealings, war, revenge and grief turned into an anti-hero who is made better by the love of a good woman and the innocence of a child. Oh yes, the show is so much more subversive than the comics. Literally one of the most typical things you could have done with that character.
And I know Billy ended season 4 with the bad side of his personality taking over. Don't even get me started on that. But if he ends the series as a villain, I will be genuinely surprised. More than willing to admit that they may do that, but I'm not convinced that these writers can do anything subversive that doesn't amount to what crazy thing can we see if the network will let us get away with next.
But in the end, when it comes to it, this guy was pretty respectful when addressing Ennis's work, even when he expressed his dislike with Ennis's take on superheroes. And everyone, again, obviously, is allowed not to enjoy it. I said at the start of this video, Ennis's writing is not for everyone, but I've seen fanboys, again, not this guy, just go into what I can only describe as whinginess about how mean Garth Ennis is to the superheroes. Another point you will have to wait for the main video. I do intend to dive in a little bit to explain why Garth Ennis has the opinion he does about superheroes and why it is a perfectly not only understandable but logical position to hold. Now, I do sympathize if it is a specific character that a writer has not a lot of love for but has taken and written completely the wrong way.
Now, when it comes to superheroes, I don't care for Garth Ennis's take. I like Garth Ennis's writing on stuff like Constantine and Preacher. He's done a lot of great comics. I like his dialogue. I like his plotting, and his plotting in The Boys is good. But I just have trouble getting over how buffoonish he makes them. I feel that he often writes superheroes a little out of character. For instance, he wrote a Punisher story where Spider-Man, Daredevil, and Wolverine all decided that it was time to take down the Punisher. But in that comic that he wrote, they were all fools. They were all buffoons that were easily outclassed by the Punisher. I think that that's out of character.
I do genuinely believe that you should just let people's heroes be. Even if it's unrealistic, if it's moronic in Ennis's words, I believe in the concept of heroes. I think stories about heroes are important. But also, subversive stories like this are also important. Now, this guy talked about Daredevil and a couple of others he felt Garth Ennis had done wrong by. I understand that truly. But when it comes to just superheroes in general and his opinion on the execution and concept of The Boys, Garth Ennis isn't really wrong about anything. Nobody is obligated to like anything. Hell, people are entitled to stare at the Mona Lisa and wonder what all the fuss is about. But stop acting like your dislike for it is a mark against the quality of his work. It's not. Okay, now that you've got a feel for where I'm coming from here, let's go into greater detail about the show, the comic, and why people's assertion that the show is better, I believe, is based on like and dislike rather than anything regarding quality. As soon as my boys video comes out.